Hello, everyone. Howie here. Thursday, January 30th, 2025. Today is going to be a little bit, I'm going to focus in on something. All right. So, we've been touching on a lot of news, a lot of philosophy, a lot of theology, a lot of religion, a lot of family life. Today, we're getting into championship season. That's how I feel. I feel like as winter starts to wind down, spring comes, we get a championship, maybe like March Madness, right? A lot of the championships are going to come up in the February, March. Okay. And, as a coach, I preach this constantly, that you need good competitors. So what I did today, I'm gonna take a little different approach here. And so what we did is the following. Okay. So I went out and I said, let me look at some articles that actually, like, bring it on. Let me look at some editorials, some pieces that are, criticizing the Trump's first week, his approach, the Republican Party, his nominations. And I found one. And I thought to myself, let me read it objectively. And I have to admit, like, right away, I do find a problem because there's language that people use, and we need to continually ground ourselves in the truth, in the reality of the history, and go back to sources and slowly dismantle the canon. I talked about this the other day. When somebody is throwing things at you, haphazardly, bombastically, attacking, that there's two responses. Well, there's many responses. You could run away, you could hide, which is not acceptable. You could throw bombs back, just being bombastic. And of course, I'm talking about intellectually, politically. I'm not talking about, obviously a physical war. Um, so this, bombardment of wild claims and misuse of words, and I shared this with you that a great professor I knew used to say, Howard, he called me Howard. Howard, you go up, you approach their cannon calmly, and you dismantle their cannon so that they can't fire anymore. And if they don't have real arguments, then they have nothing else left to attack. And you're dismantling itself. The way you dismantle the cannon is your counterattack or your offense. Okay, and so that's what I did. I went out. I found an article, and I pulled it up. I said, yeah, okay, let's see what somebody has to say. Let's go to like one of the papers of records, find a good editorial. When I say good, I mean good from their perspective, and go through it. So that's what I'm going to do today. So this way, it's important. It's important to stay honest with ourselves because maybe there's something that we're missing. Right? It's about the truth, not us being right. Okay, unless right means in the truth, and we're sure we want to be right. But there are moments where we will discover, hey, you know what, we're going too far on this point or that, we're inconsistent, and we have to really be honest with that and call ourselves out, independent of party. God first, right? Like Thomas More, I'm at the service of the king, but God's service first, right? We're not at the service of a party or any one politician. It's God, truth, and if we believe in the United States of America and its founding papers, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, that if we believe they're divinely inspired, then we stay true to them too. But always underneath God, okay, who is the truth, the living wisdom, Jesus. Okay, so let me share this article with you, and we'll talk about the author. It's in the Washington Post, and we'll go through. And I get excited because when I start to learn or uh, grow, um, get confirmed, it's all good. It's when we're staying still that I have a problem. Which brings me up to one more layer of foundation here. So for this show to remain authentic, for us to um, let me stop sharing while I explain this. For us to stay relevant. And when I don't mean relevant in the sense of getting views, I mean relevant in the terms of my own life. Am I getting better? And relevant to anybody who's choosing to listen, which, by the way, thank you for listening. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Okay. Send emails, send critiques, send articles, videos, send um, requests of topics you'd like to see. Okay. Now that I got that out of the way. But to stay relevant in the sense of like being an actual value to our society, to our culture, our relationship with our community, and to add add to it in either goodness, truth, beauty, or a combination thereof. We we need to be authentic. All right. So let's just put it the most basic level where the authenticity is. It's to be yourself, to be real, but not just real as you define, but real as God has created you and designed you to be. But it's not enough to be authentic. We have to be actively authentic, or authenticity in action. And what is that? It means that it's not just about being yourself as God designed or created you, but growing into what God has designed or created you. The growth mindset. I love this new language, right? The expansive view that we're continually expanding, and hopefully at a more rapid pace, like the Big Bang, the universe itself, not only expanding but continuing to expand at a more rapid pace, which means the explosion is still occurring. The bang is still taking place, just like our conception in many ways is still taking place. We were conceived and then grow, but it's really, you have to I believe we should see our conception as an explosion that has not stopped expanding, and the pace of the expansion hasn't slowed. Therefore, we're still in the moment of conception. So it's an emanation. It's not God just touches a button and stuff. No, it's like he's blowing life, he's breathing life into us, and it was not one quick breath, but a constant flow of God's breath is created us and sustains us and expands us and grows us. So, authentic show, hopefully an authentic person, authentic audience, an audience that are you guys, each of yourself, him or herself, I myself. We are active in that authenticity, so we're growing. And how do you grow? You have to have competition. There it is. That's why I go and get this article. So let me bring that up. All right, bring it back, and it's a Washington Post article. Here we go. It's Democracy Dies in Darkness, right? Bezos' company. This is by Perry Bacon Jr., and the title is Why Trump's First Moves in Office Have Been So Scary. The president is launching a full-scale war against modern liberalism. Okay. I'm going to jump to the bottom because I want to talk about the author, give him his credit, and know who our opponent is. You know, who we wrestle in this round, who's in our bracket. So Perry Bacon Jr. is a Washington Post columnist. It's not easy to become a Washington Post columnist. Before joining the Post, Perry had stints as a government and elections writer for Time Magazine, the Post National Desk, the Griot, and 538. He has also been an on-air analyst at MSNBC and a fellow at New America. He grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and lives there now. He's let's see, Perry.Bacon at WashingtonPost.com, and Perry Bacon Jr. is his X handle. Okay, so that's Mr. Perry. Here we go. The first thing I'm going to point out is look at his title. Look at this title here. Why Trump's first moves in office have been so scary. You know, I'm going to really go slow. I mean, is it a bad title? Well, I don't know. It depends. Depends what you define as scary. Maybe he's terrifying to some people. Okay, so fair enough. He's not terrifying to me or scary to me, but apparently he's this Mr. Bacon is scared. Why Trump's first moves in office have been so scary. It doesn't sound rhetorical. It's not a question, and it's not sarcastic. He's saying it's scary. And the subtitle is: The President is launching a full-scale war against modern liberalism. You know, I think the subtitle, in ways, is accurate, and that's what's interesting about this. So our opponent comes out. He shows his cards that he finds this scary. Okay, fine. And we could imagine situations where we would find scary. Biden was scary. Biden winning or Kamala Harris winning, and it would be scary. Not scared to the point where we cower. No, we always regroup and we do what we got to do to persevere in truth. So I get the first title, and the president is launching a full-scale war against modern liberalism. as we go on, remember that line because he does something. So our opponent comes out, he presents himself pretty honest. I think President Trump is launching a full-scale war, again, political war, war in the intellectual arena, in the arena of the congressional and constitutional parameters and function. Yeah, he's taken on modern liberalism. Okay, here we go. President Donald Trump and his aides are launching a full-scale war against modern liberalism, and I'm very worried that they will be successful. No problem with what he said there. I mean, it's his opinion, and like I said, Trump is going right at modern liberalism. True. Here we go. Though, what exactly defines liberalism is contested. Here we go. The term generally refers to the protection of individual rights, such as free speech and property ownership. But self-identified liberal politicians and liberal voters in the United States and around the world, particularly in Europe, have embraced a much broader set of values and practices that I'm referring to as modern liberalism. You know what? So far, what he's doing is okay, because he's showing that there is the classical. Well, we're going to go into this. Classic liberalism is a philosophy, right? That has three main things: free markets, laissez-faire, free market system, individual liberty, and civil liberties. Okay, individual rights such as free speech and property ownership, life, liberty, property, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So that's true. He's right. But self-identified liberal politicians and liberal voters, see now, you notice he's not saying modern liberals. He's just using the word liberal, and he's not using classical. So you have classic liberalism, okay, which is basically life, liberty, leave me alone. Don't touch me. Don't touch my stuff. Free speech. Leave the markets alone. Okay. Liberal voters in the United States and around the world, particularly in Europe, have embraced a much broader set of values and practices that I'm referring to as modern liberalism. That's true. Modern liberalism is a political movement that has embraced a much broader set of values and practices. Hey, this guy's okay. Let's see what he says, though. Now he's going to define what modern liberalism is. Those include robust higher education systems where students and professors have a significant amount of freedom in what they teach and research. Attempts to ensure equality across lines of race, gender, and sexual orientation. Respect for independent authorities that act as a check on elected leaders, such as the news media. Enthusiasm for ethnic, racial, and religious diversity, as well as immigration, free trade agreements, and other forms of multilateralism and multiculturalism. You know what? If this is really what modern liberalism is, then I think most people who voted for Trump are modern liberals. But they're not, because that's not what modern liberalism is. Let me ask you a question. What we just lived through for the last 4 years under Biden, did we see a higher education system where students and professors have a significant amount of freedom in what they teach and research? Really? There's a lot of freedom on the campuses, or major campuses, universities across the United States. You mean professors weren't being fired or canceled or punished in one form or another, for actually stating opposing sides for the sake of just philosophical exercise, taking on the opposing side, whether they believed it or not? We had students that were so open-minded to other people being on campus that believed differently than them. Is that what we experienced at the higher education level? Nothing. Higher education systems where students and professors have a significant amount of freedom in what they teach and research. Nope, that's not the case. Second, attempts to ensure equality across lines of race, gender, and sexual orientation. Yeah, I'm for equality, right? I mean, let's see. Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, that all men are, it's self evident that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Sure. So equality across lines of race, gender, and sexual orientation. Is that what we had under Biden? Is that what we would have under Kamala Harris? Equality? No, equity. They don't want equal opportunity. They want equal results. Quotas, affirmative action, DEI, non-merit based application of promotions. That's what they want. That's not equality. All of a sudden, they're back to the word equality, not equity. So you see how he starts out? The opponent comes out, got the uniform on, he's ready to go. He begins the game. And right within the first couple of minutes of the game, our opponent shows their weakness, and we're dismantling the cannon. I mean, it'd be nice to find a stronger opponent because this is too easy. This man is very weak. He's very weak and transparent. Unfortunately, so many just go right along with it because you don't stop. Not you. They don't stop. We do to dismantle. So fine. If modern liberalism is what he says it is, then we're modern liberals. But it's not. He's defining classical liberalism. It's not what they have in Europe. It's not what the modern Democratic Party is, the Liberal Party. It's the progressive. Now, progressive is a better word because it gets away from that tie to classic liberalism, which is deception, like the liberal arts. Liberal arts is a beautiful thing. But when we mean liberal arts, we don't mean children go to a liberal arts, students go to a liberal arts college and they become indoctrinated in some social engineering belief system where social justice takes over and equity, DEI takes over, and transgender issues and censorship becomes the norm. No, that's not what we're talking about. So equality across lines of race, gender, and sexual orientation. We say, oh, what about the transgender thing? Listen, nobody's saying they can't, they don't have rights. Of course they have rights. But their rights don't trump another person's rights. That's what the transgender thing is so tricky. Nobody's saying that that person can't claim to be what they are. But that person's claim that they're something that they're not, or they believe they are, can't infringe upon the other person's right, namely the woman in the bathroom. She goes into a woman's bathroom and she expects only women to be in that bathroom. If this man who has, he's free to claim he's a woman, but he's not free to take that claim, which is not biologically true, and force it upon other people's freedom, namely the women who are women going into the women's bathroom. So that's where we have to draw a line. Okay, that's it. That's why that one's tricky. But as far as that individual having the right to live their life in any way they please, as long as it doesn't infringe upon somebody else's life, go ahead. We're all for it. It's a libertarian approach. We may morally and ethically, spiritually, religiously think it's an error, but nobody's forcing that upon them. That's their, and we can, in our own personal dealings with them, try to help them if we feel if they're lost, if they're in need of compassion and patience and counseling, whatever it may be. All right, John Stuart Mill on Liberty, one of the great books of libertarianism, right? The libertarianism, the freedom. This is the problem. Liberalism from classical liberalism has been hijacked into something that it's social liberalism. It's socialism. It's soft tyranny, trying to force people to live a certain way. We talked about this the other day. You hand over certain power to the government in order to have the government help expand and protect your freedoms. You don't hand over anything to the government for the government to give you freedom. No, they're helping you maintain your freedom and exercise your freedom and protect your freedom from somebody else trespassing upon it. All right. He also says that modern liberalism is a respect for independent authorities that act as a check on elected leaders, such as the news media. The news media. He believes that modern liberalism calls for an objective news media. You mean like CNN? You mean like the um, the the, the White House interfering with social media, people's personal social media accounts to censor them? You mean to this very day, certain major platforms still marking words as controversial that are just everyday words that are they're acceptable words. They may describe political situations that are controversial, but there's nothing profane. There's nothing um, inherently dangerous about these. They're words that we use to discuss topics. So this idea that the news media, the mainstream media, which we all know is behind the Democratic Party, this man is claiming that the modern liberalism is for a independent authority such as the news media. Independent of what? We just had the other day. Let me find it here. Let me stop a second because it's really interesting. Because there's an article out yesterday. Let me see, that shows just exactly what we're talking about. Here, I'm going to bring it up. Let me do this. Let me stop sharing this one and just interject this for a second because he's claiming that the media, okay, that their party, let's get rid of that. Okay, Breitbart, Nolte, ex-staffers reveal how Politico, that's the publication, the news agency, Politico protected Biden. Don't talk about the laptop. I'll just read the first paragraph. Two former staffers at the far left Politico confirmed what everyone already knew about Politico. It protects Democrats, in this case, Joe Biden and his family of gangsters. Okay. This article goes on. I'm not going to digress down into that. But it's one of these examples of what I'm talking about, that, this man who writing the op-ed here is certainly not talking about the Democratic Party that we all experience. And that's not the one even he experienced. He can pretend to experience it. And let's see what else he says about modern liberalism. That it's an enthusiasm for ethnic, racial, and religious diversity. Okay. Is it? Is it really about diversity? Okay, see, this is the problem. If you say it's really about diversity, then all parties involved. You're telling me there hasn't been a targeted attack on anybody who's white, who's privileged. Even the word privileged is saying that they're excluded from this wonderful idea of diversity. They're canceled out. They don't matter. And by the way, if you're a straight white man, then you really got a problem. That's you're not part of our diversity. So selective diversity on the left, the modern liberalism is a selective diversity. It's not a true diversity. By the way, religious diversity. Do you think they're for religious diversity? No. As well as immigration. Do you think they're really for immigration? Immigration isn't just chaos of anybody coming in at any time. This is the inconsistency. I'm a Catholic, and I bring this up with the immigration. The U.S. bishops, Pope Francis. About this that Trump. What Trump is doing is just not. It's not morally right. But as many people have pointed out, the Vatican has high walls. You can't just come and go. So the Pope can have walls and gates and doors about who comes in, who leaves. In fact, we defined the role of the man in the family is precisely that. He's the one who opens the door and allows people in and out of the family life, decides who can come in, who should stay out. And if somebody's entered, that it's determined later that they're not good for the family, the father gives them the boot. Doors are necessary. And doors without walls are meaningless. It's like just a gate. You just walk around the side. So the idea of doors being beautiful things, operational things that allow you to use your discernment, a door without a wall is silly. A door without a house that's just a door, and you're protecting that door all day. And meanwhile, for 360 degrees around you, anybody can walk in at any time. It's literally silly. Okay, so the Pope can have that, and all kinds of federal agencies can have that. I heard that in order to, if you want to go to the congressional hearings, you have to have ID, right? But the idea of having ID to vote, the idea of stopping people at the border, the idea of, then you're anti-immigration, right? Somebody's referred to me that Trump's against immigration, making immigration illegal. He's making it illegal. No, it's the illegal process of people sneaking into the country that's illegal. Immigration itself, we have policies. And if you go through the policy, it's a legal process. He's just enforcing the law. So we all know this it's obvious, okay? As well as immigration, free trade agreements, and other forms of multilateralism and multiculturalism. So our friend, in the first, 2 paragraphs, this Mr. Bacon, Perry Bacon Jr., intellectual lightweight. It'll work though on most people, because yeah, Trump's against liberalism, and liberalism is the party that's based on free markets and individual freedom, right? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and an expanded form that leads to freedom on education and freedom in our health. No. Try to go get healthcare when you're not in the window. You can't. Is that free? Is our healthcare system free? No. Is it cost free? No. And is it free in the sense of that you can just join up anytime you want? No. There's the window, right? Okay. Let's give him. So we just destroyed him. We just dismantled his cannon in the first half. It's like we just drilled like 5 3-pointers in the first 4 minutes of the game. But we'll let it play. The clock has to run out. So he continues. Some who describe themselves as liberals don't agree with or always abide by those principles. And many conservatives and Republicans who would not describe themselves as liberals, such as Senator Mitt Romney of Utah, support many elements of modern-day liberalism. You're right. Modern-day liberalism is as it really is, as I'm defining it, which is the reality, which is a socialistic takeover and an abuse of it's unconstitutional, and it's an affront on civil liberties. Okay, that liberalism, yeah, Mitt Romney is a proponent of that, and so are most of the soft Republicans, the rhinos in the Mitch McConnell branch. Yes, they're for big government. We talked about this day in and day out. They're for bureaucracy and big government, and the ping pong game, back and forth, left and right. Let's give the ball back to our opponent and see what he can do this time. During his first term, Trump and his aides at times rejected liberal values and practices that had previously been supported by leaders in both parties, such as being generally welcoming of immigrants. Welcoming of immigrants. It's such a fundamentally stupid thing, this whole immigration debate. You could be the most pro-immigrant person in the world, and you want it to be orderly. In fact, if you are pro-immigrant, you want it to be orderly, because that's the safest and most effective way to actually have immigrants come into our country and be assimilated in a healthy fashion. I can't talk about the immigration thing anymore. It's so ridiculous. That attitude led to frequent criticism that Trump was upending norms. Now Trump is taking on modern liberalism even more aggressively by firing inspectors general. You mean people that are lifelong bureaucrats who refuse to answer to Congress or work on an agenda and a personal agenda of a Democrat politician, or are involved in the weaponization of the Justice Department, freezing federal funding for scientific research. Yes, maybe we should freeze some federal funding. Not that federal funding for scientific research is bad, but you mean there's never a time that you should check what you're spending on? You do this at your home every once in a while. It's probably good for us to do this, right? How much, honey, how much do we spend? What do we spend? Oh, we've been paying for Paramount on the Paramount channel. Oh, I never watched Paramount. Oh, cancel that. Every once in a while we have to do an accounting of what we're spending. We do that at our home. Oh, you've been buying that. I don't even eat that. I don't eat that. And that went, oh, you're buying too much fruit. It's going rotten before we can eat it. You do an accounting. What we're spending, what's good spending, what's bad. So freezing federal funding for scientific research when we have a history, listen to RFK Jr., there's a history of abuse. And it's also tied to the universities that are all one-sided. Look at the whole debate with the vaccines. So to actually freeze and step back doesn't mean you're against funding for scientific research. It means that you're taking an accounting of what are we actually spending on? How much is wasted? How much is part of an agenda or political movement that the American people have rejected? Restricting immigration, restricting. That's not true at all. They're not restricting immigration. They're stopping crime. They're stopping a criminal act. They're trying to stop a criminal act, which is somebody invading our country, not using the channels of immigration. So it has nothing to do with immigration, and therefore that's not restricting. You could actually expand immigration and do what Trump is doing, which is stop illegal activities, and on the legal channels expand it, which I always say, I think the Republicans should always take that stance, that we want to expand the number of people that come into the country legally and cut out completely all illegal. So his phrase restricting immigration is it's a complete categorical mistake, because it's not immigration in the first place, and Trump's not restricting it. He's stopping crimes, while legal immigration actually can expand and be processed properly, because you'll have the staff and the personnel to actually help people who are in line to do it properly. Trimming transgender rights. Oh, they're trimming the rights of trans. Listen, a right is something that's God-given and can't be taken away. And they have the right to their own dignity. They have the right to their vote. They have a right to their free speech. They have all these rights. Nobody should trim those. Nobody should remove those. But like going back to John Stuart Mill, you should be allowed to do anything you want unless your action infringes upon somebody else's freedom to do what they want. And if those transgender rights, they're not rights. They're using their freedom to make a decision about themselves, but then want to act on it, and that action violates another person's individual rights. And that's when you have to say no. That's what the transgender thing is about. Look at the sports issue, women's basketball game. We're not saying that person they want to say what they are. That woman, that man wants to claim he's a woman and play basketball. And okay, well but it's his right to play in the women's. No, he's not his right to play in the women's basketball game, because it infringes upon all the women who are actually women playing in the basketball game, because their rights are being stepped on by that one person. So this is why philosophy and thought and history makes sense. You don't have to be a extremely deep professor in one subject. No, you have a general knowledge, apply principles. John Stuart Mill, pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, everyone should be able to do whatever they want unless it infringes upon another person's right to do whatever they want. And that's exactly what's happening with the transgender issue. They're free to think what they want and do what they want, as long as those actions don't take away the rights of other people. And that's what happened in the sports, and that's what happened with the bathroom issues, not to mention the danger. And by the way, I'm calling out Nike. When is Nike going to stand up and protect women's sports? Nike needs to protect women's sports. All right. In his 9 days in office, he is making a number of moves in his first 9 days in office that previous Democratic and Republican presidents had avoided. Many of his actions resemble and are borrowed from other anti-liberal politicians. You see how he uses this language? It's not anti-liberal. It's not anti-classical liberal. It's not anti-liberal. It's not anti-liberal arts. It's anti-modern liberal, as defined as reality, which is I'm articulating, and I think in a pretty good manner, if I don't say so myself, which is really socialism, moving toward communism, because it is enforced in a soft, tyrannical way through censorship and deplatforming and canceling and social pressure to conform. And when you have socialism that's enforced by an authority via punishment, and that punishment can take many forms, and being deplatformed or censored or canceled or socially punished, in the sense of your reputation, well, then that's being enforced by an authority, and then it becomes communism. Okay. Many of his actions resemble and are borrowed from other anti-liberal politicians, including Hungary's Viktor Orban and Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, Ron DeSantis is anti-liberal. Yes, he's anti-modern liberalism. This is why we must not call them liberals anymore. We should really begin to call ourselves classical liberal all the time and call them progressives or call them socialist or call them proponents of tyranny. Trump's critics say he is undermining democracy. I strongly oppose the president's policies, but I'm not sure that they are anti-democratic. This he's trying to be slick here. He's trying to show that he's smart, he's intellectual, and that, the Democrats are missing the mark because they're criticizing that Trump's against democracy. And he's saying, no, that's not really accurate because the people were free to vote. And the people freely elected Trump. So obviously the people had the day at the polls, or their month at the polls, and they voted for Trump. So how is it anti-democratic? So he's trying to position himself as being a voice above the chaos in the Democratic Party, but then just completely fabricate something on the other side. He's not honest. But I'm not sure they are anti-democratic. At its core, democracy is a form of government where ultimate authority rests with the majority of citizens. So it was clearly anti-democratic when Trump tried to overturn the election results in 2020. First of all, it depends what you mean by that. If you want to use the legal channels, and illegal implying allowed, to go to court and challenge, you're allowed. Then it's not anti-democratic. You're using the legal channels, legal meaning permissible, in line with the Constitution, to challenge election results because you feel they're. And if he loses the cases, he lost the cases. So it's not anti-democratic. You can say it was a waste of time and that he lost the cases and he lost the election, but you can't say it's anti-democratic. For him challenging the elections using legal channels is not anti-democratic. Again, it's a wordplay. America is generally understood as a liberal democracy. Oh, it depends. Which America? The America we used to have? Yeah, the America that we founded by the founding fathers and mothers was a classic liberal democracy. A republic, though. A republic that is primarily focused on classic liberal principles. John Locke, right? Life, liberty, property, life, liberty, estate. A word that encompasses more than just property of land. And Thomas Jefferson, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And I want to talk about that in a minute, why he went to pursuit of happiness, why we think he might have used that instead of estate or property. So the founding fathers were protecting those principles via a republic that used the democratic process to determine who went to Washington or wherever. In the beginning was New York. It was the capital, where the capital was, in order to enact and live out the government. Meaning that elections determine who is in charge, but some basic rights, such as free speech, that's the Bill of Rights, still can't be curtailed by the government. So if Trump tries to make it harder for people to hold protest against his actions, and that's coming, I suspect, that would also be anti-democratic. This is such trash. This guy's trash. The Washington Times. It's like this is like sixth grade stuff. So if Trump tries to make it harder for people to hold where is he saying that he wants to make it harder for people to hold protest? Is this because of the document he put out, about the executive order that's dealing with anti-Semitism? And part of that is saying that, if you're here on a student visa and you break the law, not protest, because protesting is legal. You have the right to protest. You have freedom of speech. Part of freedom of speech is a protest. And if there are rules, Even the American Civil Liberties Union, go to their website. They tell you how to protest. In other words, there's things you can and cannot do. They advise you. You can't just protest anywhere you want in any way you want. You can't go onto somebody's private property. So there are rules. And what we saw this, the summer with all the protests, they weren't following the rules. There are rules. So protesting isn't just this blanket thing that you can do anything you want at all times. There's legal protest. This is what we need to talk. So if Trump tries to make it harder for people to hold, if he put legal protest in there, he might be saying something, but Trump's not trying to stop people from protesting. Trump wants to hold people. He wants to make it harder for people to hold illegal protest where people break the laws. And if you're a student from another nation and you're here on a student visa and you break the law in any form, well, that student visa should be considered. They should look at it and whether they decide to revoke it or not. You're a guest in our country. You're here to study. And if you're breaking the law by protesting in a way that is clearly off limits, and I am all for protesting, the right to protest, but we know you can't just walk into my house and protest. That's private property rights. You can go on a public property. We know we can't block streets. You can't do things that cause danger to people. There's rules. I'm not going on, but it's common sense. It's just not a blanket permission to protest in any way you want at any time. Okay? And Trump is just simply saying that if you're protesting in an illegal manner, those charges have to be looked at. And if you're somebody visiting our country, you're not a citizen, well, then there may be consequences. But a lot of what Trump is doing now, I would argue, is better understood as anti-liberal or anti-modern liberalism than anti-democratic. His sentence is half true. He's right. A lot what he's arguing, is better understood as anti-liberal. No, not as anti-liberal, as anti-modern liberalism. True. It is anti-modern liberalism as defined in reality, as I went through, not as he defined it in the beginning. I am not sure democracy requires allowing researchers at the National Institutes of Free Health reign to study what they want or pushing agencies to make sure their hiring practices take into account people's disabilities. I favor democracy with a lot of modern-day liberal practices. Trump doesn't. Unfortunately, Americans voted someone opposed to many liberal ideas into office, and he is enacting an anti-liberal agenda. Here we go, same thing over and over again. No, fortunately, I'm going to say, just change his sentence. I'm going to edit it for him because he needs an editor. I'm going to say, fortunately, Americans, us, did vote for someone opposed to modern liberalism, progressive ideas, this socialistic, tyrannical approach under the guise of compassion and what's the other word? What was that word they used all the time during the Biden's election? Was it compassion? I forget. There was this idea. They love to use these virtues that he's thoughtful and he's uniting. I mean, there was nothing about Biden's administration that united people. There was nothing open. There was nothing transparent. Okay. Trump may end up undoing much of American modern liberalism. American modern liberalism is what I've described. It's a mess, and I hope he does undo most of it, all of it. Though birthright citizenship is in the Constitution, that's debatable, and whether it's debatable, either debatable or debatable in how it's enacted. Many, and which, by the way, you're allowed to have a debate. That's why we have courts and lawyers and attorneys and the free press and editorials. Just like he's writing an editorial, people can write editorials. And if it loses in the courts, in the court of the arena of ideas, and then it loses. But there's nothing wrong with to just flat out say it's in the Constitution. That's his opinion. Many liberal practices can be changed fairly easily through legislation or executive orders. I suspect a lot of lawsuits filed against Trump's actions will be unsuccessful, with conservative judges able to find ambiguities in the law to defend the president they are aligned with ideologically. And not only is much of modern liberalism not required by law, it also doesn't have a strong foundation of popular support to fall back on. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, is that really the case? I mean, almost half the country still voted for Kamala Harris. So, I mean, unfortunately, from our side, there is a strong foundation of popular support. Okay. And that's where we have to really educate people. And that's why you see Trump's decision for the press room, the White House press briefing room. They're going to hold a seat open for a person in the new media. They're acknowledging it's not just the papers of record anymore that get a seat at the table, the seat in the room. You have to allow. You see the effects of people like Rogan and Tucker Carlson and Lex Friedman. It matters. Some policies that are part of modern liberalism and strongly supported by liberal politicians, including safety net programs and Social Security, are also beloved by voters. So Trump and anti-liberal conservative leaders across the world are generally reluctant to roll them back. But other parts of modern liberalism, such as colleges and universities with tenured faculty, have been demonized by Republican officials and are not really defended by Democrats. So the average voter doesn't see them as being that important or useful. No, you know what happened? People always had a great respect for universities and higher education, and respect for people who had the title of professor or dean. They lost the respect. They gave up the respect by acting the way they did, by not defending the lone voice in the room, by censoring and canceling out people. They gave up. And you see Harvard's professor, right? I reported a month or two ago that they have to rebrand. They have to market in a different way. That's what he's saying. That's what he's telling his faculty and staff, that, whether he believes it or not, he knows it's bad for business. So it's not that it's not appreciated. It's the way they've exercised their roles has been disingenuous, has been not noble, not honorable. So it's not, don't blame the American people, don't appreciate it. American people appreciate professors very, very much so. And academics who are truly, look at Victor Davis Hanson and people who are very much so. So don't mistake their actions and how they handle those titles and people's disgust toward it as a rejection of just higher education. In other words, we're all barbarians who don't care about universities. No, not a case. In fact, I've over and over again told you how I appreciate these new universities coming, like the University of Austin and these small liberal arts colleges that are popping up and small high schools. I support them wholeheartedly. Okay, so by the time Trump's second term is over, I worry that we will live in a country where corporations are much more white and male than a decade ago. Ridiculous, because the president's anti-diversity stances will be widely adopted. It's not anti-diversity, it's anti-DEI, which wasn't about diversity. It was about changing the way positions or spots or acceptance into institutions was determined. So what he's doing is restoring merit-based. If a consequence of that is the demographic breakdown of a certain school or a certain changes, well, so be it. But you can't get rid of merit-based. You have to do merit-based, and you have to help people who are don't have the same access to schools. And sure, we should always help them. Always be charitable. Always offer assistance. But you can't handicap. Still has to be a level playing field. You can't give people extra points on a test based on the skin color. You can't take more of this group than that group. It's not fair. It's reverse discrimination. We know that. So he is not anti-diversity. He's saying diversity is not the goal in itself. It's a nice thing to have, but it's always merit first. But there will be very little academic research showing that change, because universities will steer their faculty away from work that might offend the Trump administration. You see what he's doing? He knows that the stats will come out showing that the merit-based way is the proper approach. Okay, the classic liberalism way is the approach with free markets and civil liberties. But he's going to claim that the universities are not going to show those stats because they're not going to do research because they're afraid of Trump. No, they'll do the stats, and the stats won't say what he wants them to say. So therefore, they won't report them. That's the more accurate way to look at it. He finishes up with this. It's time for aggressive, sustained defense of liberal institutions and practices. No, sirree, Bob. I say it's time for an aggressive, sustained defense of classic liberal philosophies and government solutions, which is half the solutions are don't get involved, leave people alone. That's the solution. And he says immediately, period. People who believe in the importance of modern liberalism need to explain why these ideas and programs are good for the country and not simply fall back on casting Trump and his allies as anti-democratic, cruel, or racist. You know what? He's right. If you really believe in modern liberalism as it is in reality, basically a socialistic state that does not use merit as a standard, and that confiscates one person's goods to give them to another, and doesn't look at things, doesn't celebrate the three main things: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as the core. Well, then make the argument for it. If you're a socialist, then make the argument for it. I largely agree with those characterizations, but they don't specifically explain the dangers of Trump's actions or the virtues of what he's dismantling. He's dismantling virtues. That's amazing. There is so much to celebrate. In fact, remember the word virtues, because I'm going to talk about Thomas Jefferson in a minute. And it's really interesting that he's using the word virtues. There is so much to celebrate about modern day liberalism. Inspector generals and journalists may often stop government officials from misusing public funds. Diversity and inclusion programs make sure the best people hired. Oh my goodness. Look what he's saying. That sentence is it's complete polar opposite. Diversity, inclusion, DEI programs make sure the best people are hired. The best. Independent of test results or how they did in school, based on the color of someone's skin or their sex. That's what that's what makes them the best. Opposite, the complete opposite of what Martin Luther King said. Content of their character, right? Who they are, and part of who they are is, of course, what they know and how they perform, not the color of their skin. He's saying that color of their skin is what makes the people the best hired, not just whoever's a friend of the boss. Oh, so here we go. So it's the cronyism. Immigrants provide creativity, work hard, and ultimately economic growth. I agree completely that immigrants provide creativity, hard work, and ultimately economic growth. You know why? I agree. He's right. But illegal immigrants don't. Illegal immigrants are a burden on the system. It creates a dangerous environment, and it actually hurts legal immigrants who do provide creativity, hard work, and ultimately economic growth. They'll just never admit the facts that we're not talking about. It's apples and oranges. He loves immigrants apparently, and so do I. But he includes people who violate the laws of this nation and come here illegal and take advantage of the situation with people who are waiting online and doing things properly. So do colleges and universities. Trump isn't just engaging in a cultural war, that cliche, that lazy political analysis. I guess I'm a lazy political analysis. Apply to any policy that touches on race, gender, or sexual orientation. His policies will make America less productive. Oh my goodness. Does he really believe that? Does he really believe that Trump's policies will make America less productive, less innovative, and less equal? It's disgusting. What an idiot. His policies will make America less productive. It's already more productive just by him being in office. Less innovative? Oh yeah. No, he's not rallying all the great creative minds in technology and bringing back manufacturing. No. And less equal. Ridiculous. He is trying to make America a democracy with much less liberalism, and he must be stopped. Once again, this is by Perry Bacon Jr. Mr. Bacon, I'd love for you to come on the show. I'm going to reach out to him. He should come on the show and go through this this beautifully obviously I'm tongue in cheek, this beautiful essay here and talk about it. And we could go through some history. In fact, Mr. Bacon, I think you should watch the rest of the show because I'm going to do some work for you right now because you apparently didn't do any. So let me stop sharing here and talk to you a little bit. Let me talk to you about the Supreme Court, okay? Because you say, Howie, why are we going to the Supreme Court? Well, because I think when we talk about the Constitution and we talk about American founding, right? Obviously, there's a lot of talk right now about the president. There's a lot of talk about Congress. And the court does get, right now it's not in the news. And of course, one of the great roles of the president is to appoint Supreme Court justices when an opening comes up, and then Congress, the Senate has to confirm. So the main role of the Supreme Court is to determine whether things are constitutional or not. Okay, mainly, right? There's other things they do, but either let's just say a law is passed, whether it's constitutional or somebody's enacting a statute at some level, it could be local, state, county, federal. They look at it if it goes through the process or they take it directly. Is it constitutional? What makes it unconstitutional? Well, it violates the Constitution. They're doing something that the Constitution says you can't do, or the Constitution doesn't say they can do. Okay, so we have Constitution, we have Supreme Court, we have the Constitution, and we have what's unconstitutional. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go through a little journey here. Where are my glasses here? Okay. So what I was doing this morning, because this article fueled me to go forward here. So we have the Supreme Court. They look at things that whether it's constitutional or not. And there's certain ways to look at the whether something. How do they determine whether something's constitutional? And there's a couple of different ways. They can look at they look at the text. It's uh, the textual interpretation. They look at the text. What does the Constitution say? Does that say, is that, and the law or whatever they're looking at, does it in contrast, is it contradictory to the text of the United States Constitution? Second would be the original intent. So if it's not specifically in the text, what's the intent of the founding fathers? What did they may not have said, because they couldn't predict the future of what we're dealing with in terms of like AI or internet, but right, modern use of fossil fuels. So what was their intent? And then you apply that intent to the modern situation. Okay. And then of course there's precedent being that there's been a Supreme Court and other courts around for a long time. And if certain decisions have been made, that the court tries to uphold those decisions. But that's not an absolute, of course, because a court can be wrong. The Supreme Court in an earlier time could be wrong. And, so it's precedent isn't the equivalent of textual interpretation, because text is clear. It doesn't change. It violates it, out. It's not constitutional. Or intent of the fathers, clearly that the intent of the fathers is this, and you bring that law, it's in violation, it's out. And then precedent. Now, if it's not a clear reason to overturn it, the kind of the behind the precedent approach is that, well, you leave it. But if it's clearly that the court earlier was wrong, like they did with Roe v. Wade, they're saying that we're not saying abortion is right or wrong. We're saying that there was precedent. There is precedent. The Roe v. Wade. They said that the federal government can't. It's a right to have an abortion, and they're saying no, the court was wrong. So the precedent gets thrown out the window, and they return it to the states. They don't make a decision on abortion. They say the issue goes back to the states. So, but the textual is the most important. And if you look at the textual, you have the Constitution itself, and of course, the Declaration of Independence is really important, in the sense that if you look at Thomas Jefferson's writing, okay, and I read it before, I'm going to read it again, that what is the essence of the Constitution? What is the essence of our founding? And I think it has to be, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I know we've heard this a million times, and I'm not claiming to be a constitutional scholar. I'm not claiming to say listen, I'm not adding I'm not adding discovered layers here. What I'm doing is reminding us that in order to move forward in a truthful manner and to battle in the intellectual arena against this kind of editorial that we just looked at, and to make sure that we're consistent with ourselves, that we ground ourselves in these principles, and we look and we say, okay, if we're mini Supreme Court justices, if you will, right? Each one of us acts as a Supreme Court justice and says, I need to look at this, whatever's going on in my life or whatever's being proposed by this politician, and where does it fit in? If I was a Supreme Court justice, would it be constitutional? And then you look at the text. But really, the intent of the founding fathers is really the key, because if it's in the text, it's really pretty obvious. Okay, Bill of Rights, it's clear, and if it's a violation. But what's the intent of all these other things that we have to interpret, because it's not stated in the text, because they weren't dealing with our modern world and particular circumstances of an event. So the intent becomes really important. So we ground ourselves into what is the intent of the fathers. The intent of the fathers is that line. So even though we've heard it a million times, and should we ever stop? It's like the gospel. Is there ever a time not to go back to the gospel? You say, I read that 100 times. Don't read the gospel anymore. No, you read the gospel. You keep reading it because it unfolds. Nothing's added to the gospel, but I use this analogy like a napkin. You know those napkins you pull out of the little container at the cafe, and then you can unfold the napkin? By unfolding the napkin, you're not adding anything to the napkin. It's not getting bigger. You're just unfolding what was positioned in one way. And as we go through life and we look at great writings, especially writings that deal with axioms, principles, um, and when we unfold them, where our experience, our life, our education is expanding, and we unfold and we find more in the napkin, even though the napkin itself is the same. So that's the same with the Constitution, same with Declaration of Independence, same with this phrase. So we unfold it today, and maybe now where we sit today, right? January 30th, 2025, where do we sit today? We unfold the napkin of this great phrase out of the Declaration, and we look at it a little more closely. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All right, what's self-evident? That it's obvious, that there's no argument required. You don't have to make an argument. If something's self-evident, then you start with that. You don't have most things you have to prove. No, you're starting with this axiom. This is it. That's self-evident. There's no argument. We start from this point. There's no argument to get to that point. So these truths, okay? So he's saying these truths are self-evident. All right. And the self-evident is this, that all men, of course he means humans, men and women, are created equal. Created. We shouldn't lose the word created. We're created. There was a time where we didn't exist. Right? So when did we come into existence? Conception. That's what the word means. You conceive an idea. It wasn't there. Now it is. We're conceived. Sperm meets egg. We're conceived inside a woman. We're conceived. A child is born. A child is conceived. Child comes into, you could say we existed in the mind of God before, but that's like that's another road that we can explore. It's more of a mystical, spiritual road. But the idea of like what we see as a human being is conceived. Okay, they're created, but created by who? Well, he's going to answer that for us, right? Created, that all men are created equal. Now, what does that mean? All men can run the 40-yard dash in the same time. All men are the same height. All men have the same good looks. All men have the same, beautiful hair. All women, can, whatever, laugh the same. No. So that's not what it means. So what does it mean? It doesn't mean equal. It doesn't mean that's what the liberals don't get. That's That's DEI. That's equity, not equality. Okay, if you interpret created equal means that the results have to be the same, then that's equity. And that's not clearly what not Thomas Jefferson is saying. Okay, not all men are not created with equal results. All men are created equal. So what is the equality? I've said it over and over again, and you can never get tired of saying it. It is the dignity that God puts in you. You are a self-contained creation from God, and your right to exist is equal to every other person that's ever has, is, or will exist. You are loved equally by equal to everybody who has, is, or will ever exist. And that dignity, that honor, that nobility, that sonship or daughtership as a child of God is no better or no worse than anybody else, no matter your circumstances, and no matter the results of your life, no matter how fast you run the 40-yard dash, no matter how much hair or how handsome you are or how rich you are. It's exactly the opposite of equal results, independent of results. Even if the results are the worst, even if you have made all kinds of mistakes your entire life and messed everything up, your dignity as a human being is still not any less or any more. And that's the power of redemption. And you can return to it at any time. So Thomas Jefferson, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator. They are endowed. They're filled with this. What are they filled with? But first, by their creator. Creator, by the way, is a capital C in the document. Okay? Creator is God. When you capitalize something, you're saying it's something more than just a noun. It's a proper noun. It's God. Who's the creator? God. They're endowed by their creator. They are given by their creator. They're endowed as such a, it's inserted into them. It's part of their DNA. They're endowed. They're saturated. They're marinated by their creator with what? With certain unalienable rights, right? Unalienable means it can't be taken away. Nobody ever can take it away. You can be put in jail, but you can never have your freedom taken away. Your true freedom is really at the core of your being. And no matter what your physical constraints are, you're still free if you choose to exercise that freedom, as difficult as it may be. So there are unalienable rights. And what are those unalienable? And by the way, rights is a capital R. So creator is a capital C, God, rights, not just these little things, these legal, no, the rights, they're part, it's like, it's a proper noun. They're your rights. It's a personal part of you that gets a capital letter, just like your name gets a capital letter. Your rights get a capital R, your dignity, with certain unalienable rights that among them are life, capital L, liberty, capital L, and the pursuit of happiness, capital H. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We spoke about this the other day a little bit when we read George Washington's letter to the Hebrew congregation of Rhode Island. It was such a beautiful letter. And then we talked a little bit about natural rights, right? And the man's ability, his reason given to him by God in order to learn things. And what do we learn about? We learn about God's creation. So God gives us a brain or ability to reason. And with that, we can find out a lot ourselves. We can use that brain to learn a lot about what? God's creation, the world, as opposed to revelation, right? Keep the Sabbath holy. You can never discover that yourself. God told the Jews that. He told them, keep the Sabbath holy, right? So that's a revelation. There's nothing that couldn't be discovered. But 2 + 2 is 4. You could discover 2 stones and 2 stones. I put them together, 4. But using your God-given ability, reason, to learn about God's world and the beauty, the internal consistency, the mathematical beauty in that terms, or the scientific beauty, or the philosophical beauty, or the ethical beauty, or the political beauty, whatever it may be, economic beauty. Okay. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want to go to, I discussed this a little bit, and I'm going to go to John Locke. And I want to, because it's important. So why Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And of course, it's Locke said life, liberty, and property, life, liberty, and the state. And you say, why is it 2 different words? And because it's written in English, they say it's a different translation from English to English. Well, no, because there were different editions of it printed during his life, and some used property, some used the state. Is also the understanding of modern English, whether it's property. So estate and property for Locke, you can interchange. Estate allows for a little bit broader concept of property, where property may think of just like the land that you own, property, whereas estate means like your estate sale is your property and all the items you own. So estate is a broader concept. I want to look at John Locke, right? So John Locke, he wrote about it in a book called 2 Treatises of Government. And in the second treatise, which was titled An Essay Concerning the True Original Extent and End of Civil Government, that was the second essay. So his book is two treatises of government, and the second treatise of that book is called An Essay Concerning the True Original Extent and End of Civil Government. And it was published in 1689, okay? And I want to talk to a couple of chapters, and I'm going to quote him, where he talks about the life, liberty, and property. Okay, so one spot in chapter 2, which is called On the State of Nature, I'm quoting Locke. Locke says, quote, "The state of nature has a law of nature to govern it." Right? The law, right? The natural law. We discover it, which obliges everyone. And reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind. I mean, this is where Jefferson gets it. Okay? Reason, okay, teaches all mankind. So we use our reason to learn about what? Natural law. The state of nature has a natural law to it. We use our reason to learn. So it teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. So there's one manifestation of his saying. No one ought to harm another. So no one person should harm another person in what? His life, your health, your liberty, your sovereignty, your ability to decide on your own what to do, or possessions, your stuff. All right. On chapter 5 of property, the chapter 5 is called of property, he says, though the earth and all inferior creatures be common to all men, yet every man has a property in his own person. So he's talking about what is property? You have your own self. This nobody has any right to but himself. The labor of his body and the work of his hands, we may say, are properly his. In other words, you have this body and it's yours. And nobody has any right to your body but yourself. Consent. You must give consent for someone to interact with you physically, okay? And any labor that's produced from this body or your body, in a sense, in your liberty, is your possession. So if you grow tomatoes, they're your tomatoes. Nobody can touch your body without your consent, and nobody can touch your tomatoes without your consent, because those tomatoes came from the labor of your body. It's elementary, but it's really good for us to be reminded of this. When you pay taxes, do you have a choice? Because you're growing tomatoes and they're taking your tomatoes. Okay? Chapter, 7 of political and civil society. He says, the great and chief end, therefore, of men's uniting into commonwealths and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property. This is so important. The great and chief end. So the purpose of men's uniting into commonwealth, of submitting to citizenship of a government and putting themselves under government so the government has power over them. So why do we do this? Why do we submit to a government? Is the preservation of their property. You do it because you want the government to help preserve your life, liberty, and property. Because somebody can just come and violate your life, liberty, and property. And if it's just anarchy, then you have to defend yourself. And what if you're not strong enough, or there's too many of them? Well, the government comes in and says, you can't do that. You can't touch his life, his liberty, or his property. So you submit to this government in order for that government to protect the three essences of your life, right? The essence, what can't be taken away, the unalienable rights given to you by your creator, life, liberty, property. And last part, let's see, chapter 9 on the ends of political society and government. This is what he says. The end of law. So what's the purpose of law? Is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. For in all the states of created beings capable of laws, where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law. But freedom is not, as we are told, a liberty for every man to do what he lists. For who could be free when every other man's humor might domineer over him? But a liberty to dispose and order as he lists his persons, actions, possessions, and his whole property within the allowances of those laws under which he is, and therein not to be subject to the arbitrary will of another, but freely follow his own. It's beautiful. He's basically saying that you are in charge of yourself. And in order to have that freedom, you need laws to protect that freedom. But those laws should never restrict your freedom or abolish your freedom. That's like the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is there to clearly say the government can't do these things to you. But that's what happened. The bureaucracy, the scope and size of government, the power consolidation, the bureaucracy, all that stuff infringes upon us, and it does start to abolish or restrain. So the very idea of the reason you submit to a government is in order to retain that freedom. but then the government itself increases so large that it starts to eat away at the very freedom that you wanted the government to protect. And we talked about this the other day, but it's something worth talking about every day. All right, so that's John Locke. Now, let's say why did Thomas Jefferson life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And I think it's pretty. If we spend a little time, it becomes, I think, it's fairly obvious while he said happiness instead. And let me see. I made some notes. Let me go back over here. And I think because if you look at like just like the state difference between property and estate, property might be seen as just real estate, the land. Estate means all your possessions. But Thomas Jefferson was looking at something even more. He's like even broader than estate, the pursuit of happiness. Happiness being your property, your landscape, your real estate, your physical possession, your estate, but also your virtue. That nobody can take your virtue from you. And nobody also can take your intellectual possessions, right? Intellectual property. We have property, right? Intellectual property rights. So there's your labor. They can't take your labor. They can't take your land. They can't take your physical items, your possessions, your books and your couch. They can't take your intellectual property. They can't take away your creativity, your think about, they can't take away, he used industry, your entrepreneurial spirit, if you're an artist, your creativity. So Thomas Jefferson, by saying life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, he's using the word happiness to encompass a broader understand of property and estate, to include those abstractions, which I think is beautiful. It does cause a little, because it's not easy to go right from happiness to those other things. But in the context of knowing Locke said property or estate, to expanding it, you say, okay, now Thomas Jefferson is understanding I think the intellectual property rights is really clear, because we see that all the time with copyright and trademarks, right? We protect those, and we honor those, and we say, wait, he created that. He's got a right. You can't just go take his idea. So I think if we stop there for a second, and we have Supreme Court, we're all little mini Supreme Court justices. We have to look at what's constitutional, what's not constitutional. If something's unconstitutional because it violates the Constitution, we have to look at the text. If we don't have the exact text, we look at the intent of the founding fathers. To know the intent of the founding fathers, we go to the Declaration, particularly this phrasing right here. We look at it clearly. It tells us where God, he's acknowledging God. He's acknowledging the internal dignity that can't be taken away. He's the philosophical background of Locke, right? He adds happiness instead of state or property to expand. And then we say, okay, this is where we are. This is a beautiful reminder of when they're passing something, and we can see how far the government has gone to do more than that. And then we have this editorial we looked at today, and you say, well, this is clearly this guy. Modern liberalism is not that. Modern liberalism is trying to guarantee the happiness, and that's how we see how the stuff all comes back together. Thomas Jefferson said pursuit of happiness, not life, liberty, and happiness. Pursuit, the opportunity for happiness. Set the stage for happiness. That's like the same as equality, to have the opportunity to be educated, opportunity to apply to that job, the opportunity to join the military and work your way through the ranks. Opportunity, not guaranteed outcome. So that's where, you see where it comes back? Jefferson put the word pursuit. And if you want to understand the difference of pursuit of happiness versus just happiness, think about equality of opportunity versus equity, liberals wanting to guarantee the outcome. You see how it all comes? And that's why when you look at the modern liberal progressive philosophical apparatus, it's inconsistent through and through with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the intent of the founding fathers, and the philosophical background where the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson specifically, in this key phrase of the Constitution. And Locke, of course, wasn't standing alone. Locke was coming off a huge uh, heritage of intellectual ideas, going back to the Greco-Romans. And if you want to see where that connection is, one of the Jefferson saying happiness instead of property. What did he identify? He's identified the virtue, intellectual property, but also virtue is part of your property. Where does that come? Virtue ethics. That comes from the Greco-Roman. Honor, nobility, dying for your handshake. You shook your hand, you gave your word, you made an oath. It was it. You did it. Okay? So the Greco-Roman tradition, the Enlightenment, right? Like great philosophers. And then you have Locke, the American Revolution. I'm telling you, I'm reading this book, The Radicalism of the American Revolution. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And it just shows you how it explains in really incredibly research detail why America is so special and how it all comes down and how our economy, the economic system, and the social structure was so unique and resulted in this great American experiment. I highly recommend this. And I'm going to finish today with one little reading. Okay. So we go through and we see how the Greco-Roman leads to the Enlightenment. Enlightenment leads to Locke, right? And then we go to our beautiful Constitution, and we see how classical liberalism is what we really cherish. Modern liberalism is just a misnomer. It shouldn't even be called liberalism anymore. And now it's all laid out in a beautiful, consistent way in our thinking. Highlights the inconsistencies in the thinking, like in the essay the editorial that I read today. And I'm going to finish with this. I read part of this the other day, and I'm going to read a little bit more of it. It's from Imprimis. I showed you, right? And Imprimis, and it was a essay written by Glenn Ellmers, Religious Liberty and the Genius of the American Founding. And in it I read George Washington's letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, which if you haven't seen that episode, it's really worth watching, and or go read the letter yourself. This part I want to finish with though. So he's talking about many similar things that I've been touching on today, and then at the end he's talking about the founders, right, and what they had to deal with. And he says, in order to establish Republican self-government, okay, so they had this, it sets a stage, right? So no government, we don't have a king. We don't have this idea of people being born into the monarchy through heritage, hereditary passing on. We're not a theocracy where there's one religion determining everything. So how do they balance the moral and ethical and how do they balance all this? So he says, in order to establish Republican self-government, the American founders had to solve complicated problems. That meant figuring out how to create moral and political legitimacy for the new nation. It also meant establishing the sacredness of the law, which alone can command the citizens' devotion and obedience, while avoiding the religious conflict and persecution that had plagued Europe. So you see, without it being a theocracy and a religion determining the law, how do you make the law sacred? And it was this mixture of, using reason given by God to explore what God has created, God's world, that gives it the sacredness because you're acknowledging God. But yet you're not saying it's coming all from revelation. It's coming through the use of mind and reason, which can grow and change. Revelation doesn't change. It's revealed and that's it. This is the written law of God, the tablets, right? Whereas this is saying, okay, you can use your reason to explore God's territory. It's beautiful. That solution they came up with is famously stated in the Declaration of Independence, the laws of nature and of nature's God. This revolutionary truth, combining human reason and divine revelation, provided the basis for establishing religious liberty for the first time in human history. See? It allowed for liberty within religion, because before all the authority came from religion, so you can't have multiple religions because the religion itself is given the authority. But when the authority is handed over to the mind discovering God's creation, then it allows for more than one religion. And that's the unique part of the American experiment in terms of religious liberty. And what allows somebody like George Washington to write that letter to the Hebrew congregation of Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island. It's awesome. Okay, so let me see. Let me just make sure we're still going here. Okay. By looking into the laws of nature or the laws of reason and nature's God as the ultimate justification for their revolution, the founders were asserting that there was an objective moral order in the world because the world was created by a benevolent and reasonable God. Since our minds are a gift from God and He intended us to use them, we can perceive much of this moral order through our rational faculties. We can't know through reason alone those things that only come directly from revelation, including 5 of the 10 commandments. Aristotle, who lived hundreds of years before Christ, could not know about keeping the Sabbath holy, but he could know that one should honor one's parents and that theft and murder are wrong. You see what he's saying? It's like the example I use about the Sabbath. I mean, that's just, there's nothing to discover. You can't discover that. That was told by God. So some of the commandments are revelation commandments, but some, although revealed by God, can also be learned. For example, the idea that you should honor your parents could become that principle of honoring one's parents. You could use your rational mind to come to that conclusion. You could make an argument for it, or that you shouldn't steal. And John Locke makes the argument that you shouldn't steal because of person's property. That's the fruit of their body. Can't touch their body or the fruit of their body or the product of their body or the labor, the results of their labor. So that's why you can't steal. So you could use your mind to end up in that conclusion. Okay. But he could know that one should honor one's parents and that theft and murder are wrong. That is why Aristotle's teaching in his Ethics is almost perfectly compatible with the morality proclaimed in the Bible. This natural moral order exists outside of our will. It exists whether we like it or not. We are born into both a physical and a moral world that we do not create. Today, leftists think they can alter human nature, for example, by allowing children to choose gender reassignment surgery. But this will never work and will never lead to true happiness because we cannot change our nature. By contrast, the laws of nature and nature's God are fixed and unchanging. They serve as the ground for political authority and supply conventional or everyday law with sacred and transcendental authority. In establishing this foundation for American politics, the founders addressed the 3 problems mentioned above. First, they solved the split between piety and citizenship by supplying a common ground for morality. Since we can understand virtue and vice through our own rational facilities, the law can enforce moral precepts that are acknowledged by both political and ecclesiastical authorities. In other words, because the morality of the Bible and the morality of reason are compatible, one can be both a pious believer and a good citizen, while avoiding the contentious sectarian disputes that tore Europe apart. Second, this common ground of morality makes it possible to delineate in a clear way the political and religious realms. That the separation of church and state becomes possible for the first time can be seen most clearly in Jefferson's Virginia Bill for Religious Freedom. The Declaration's teaching about the laws of nature and nature's God establishes a kind of political theology, a non-sectarian ground of legitimacy that makes the laws sacred without getting the government involved in theological disputes about the Trinity, faith versus works, etc. According to many Protestant ministers of the founding era, this also allowed true Christianity to flourish for the first time because Christianity can be preached by choice rather than by coercion. Third, the founders solved the problem of religious persecution because the government and the churches can agree on a moral code that is compatible with both reason and revelation. Each can operate in its proper realm without intruding on the other. It becomes possible to institutionalize religious liberty by prohibiting religious tests for office and keeping government out of the business of punishing heresy. And he ends up with this last paragraph. The American founders invocation of the transcendent moral authority of nature is one of the most remarkable acts of statesmanship in human history. The question which we and all American patriots confront today is whether we still understand and appreciate this incredible gift of religious liberty bequeathed to us by the founders. Do we still have the knowledge and courage to keep alive the sacred fire of liberty? Bravo, 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 Mr. Ellmers. Mr. Glenn Ellmers writing is appearing in the Imprimis December 2024 edition issue of Religious Liberty and the Genius of the American Founding. I love this stuff. I hope it helps. Thanks for going on this journey. And as he said, the sacred fire, right, of liberty. We need to know where we stand. We need to be able to dismantle the canons. Don't let them own the language. And it's not our language. It's the language that accurately reflects the truth. The closer the language is to the truth, the less space, the less shadow. Shadow is where the ambiguity takes place. The words need to be close. Classic liberalism. We're classic liberals. Okay? So, and, you know, even the word conservative could be, seems like it's closing in on itself. No. Okay? So this is where we have to, and we have those labels and we have to use them best we can, but at least let's know so we can explain these things, dismantle their canon, and they're left standing there. And of course, let's not be hypocrites. If we dismantle their canon and they come to start to see the light, not the light that we shine, but the light that we choose to stand under from God, because it's always about him, from him, and for him. And if we're gracious, if we're lucky enough, blessed enough to be standing in the light, well, then that's, you know, we can't take credit for that. All we can take credit for is staying in the light and doing things to protect ourselves and to spread the light. And if our arguments, good, productive dialogue, and dismantling their canon results in them seeing the light, we may have to make sure we welcome into the light, right? Don't ever make it's not about a never-ending battle. No, we battle in order to have peace. The only reason you have battles is for peace. The goal is always peace, 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 peace. All right. So let's always be open and welcoming and most importantly, willing to be corrected ourselves when need be. And that need will be. All right. I love you guys. Have a great day. This was a lot of fun. Please send your comments, share, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Send some emails. I'll talk to you soon. Okay. I'll see you soon. Bye.